He assumed the alien initiation was just a formality, didn't expect an alien wife included. The sacred flames danced in 3 perfect tongues, casting shifting shadows across the ancient stone chamber. Captain Jack Risk. Riley knelt before the ceremonial. Bola's muscular frame tense with barely contained impatience, the wooden sticks felt absurdly light in his callous hands. Hell, he'd handled plasma rifles with more reverence than this alien mumbo. Jumbo, repeat the words, outsider, commanded the priest, his violet skin seeming to absorb the firelight. The old bastard's pointed ears twitched with what Jack hoped was approval, not irritation. Those deep forehead ridges made reading his expression about as easy as navigating an asteroid field. Blindfolded, Jack cleared his throat and butchered the alien syllables with characteristic confidence. Keth Narvos, the words felt like gravel in his mouth, but he'd sweet-talked his way through worse situations. A simple ceremony for some rare minerals. Easy money. The priest's staff struck the stone floor with a resounding crack. The binding is complete binding. Jack's eyebrows shot up. I thought this was just a movement at the chamber's entrance cut. Him short, she emerged from the shadows like something out of a fever dream, and Jack's smartass comment died in his throat. The alien woman's violet skin seemed to glow in the firelight, those spiral patterns tracing elegant lines across her arms and exposed back. Her silvery hair caught the light as she moved with fluid grace toward the altar holy. Jack breathed, then caught himself. Greetings. The priest's weathered face cracked what might have been a smile. Meet your bride, Captain Riley. Liara, daughter of Chief Corvin. The bottom dropped out of Jack's stomach. My what? Now Lara stepped closer, her dark eyes studying him with curious intensity when she spoke. Her voice carried the musical quality of her people. The ritual is complete. Husband, we are bound by sacred fire. Jack scrambled to his feet, nearly dropping the ceremonial sticks. Well, hold on there, sweetheart. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just here for some crystals. Not of the crystals are the Dowie. The priest interrupted his tone, suggesting this should be obvious. An outsider may claim our sacred stones without joining our tribe. You have spoken the binding words before the eternal flame, but I didn't know what the hell I was saying. Jack's voice echoed off the stone walls. Lara tilted her head, those spiral patterns seeming to shift in the firelight. Ignorance does not void sacred law. You are now my husband and I am your wife. Jack ran a hand through his dark hair. His mind racing. The crystals he needed were worth a fortune enough to set him up for life. But marriage to an alien, this wasn't exactly what he'd had in mind when he charmed his way past the tribal guards. Look, this is all very traditional, he said carefully. But where I come from, marriage is usually discussed beforehand. You know, dating, getting to know each other, that sort of thing. Lara's expression remained serene. We have the rest of our lives for such things. The binding is done. The priest gathered his robes and turned toward the exit. The ceremony chamber is yours for the night. Tomorrow you will be presented to the tribe as husband and wife. Wait. Jack called after him. But the old alien was already disappearing into the quarter alone with his new wife. Jack found himself at a loss for words. A rare occurrence. Liara moved to tend the sacred flames, her movements graceful and purposeful. The golden bangles on her shoulder caught the light as she worked. So, Jack said finally, this is awkward. Lara glanced at him over her shoulder. You find me displeasing? No, God, no, you're beautiful. It's just, he gestured helplessly. This morning, I was a free man with a simple job. Now I'm apparently married to someone whose name I can barely pronounce. Liara, she said slowly, a hint of amusement in her voice. It is not difficult, Lyra, Jack repeated, and she nodded approvingly. Better, and you are Jack. Riley the smuggler who thinks he can charm his way through any situation. Jack's eyebrows rose. You know about me. Word travels quickly on Zeus. A human arrives seeking our sacred stones, and the elders take notice. She turned to face him fully. They chose me because I am curious about your people. Curious how Liara stepped closer. Close enough that the could see the intricate details of the spiral patterns on her skin. Humans are said to be passionate, unpredictable. I wish to see for myself. Jack felt heat that had nothing to do with the sacred flames. And what do you see? A man who speaks before he thinks, acts before he plans, and finds himself bound to a woman. He did not expect her lips curved in what might have been a smile. Perhaps the elders chose well. Dawn broke over Agios with twin amber suns, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Jack woke to find Lara already gone from their share chamber, leaving only the lingering scent of exotic flowers and the memory of her warm presence beside him through the night. Nothing had happened. They'd simply talked until exhaustion claimed them both. But the awareness of her had made sleep elusive. He found her in the courtyard, moving through what appeared to be a morning ritual. Her body flowed like liquid silk as she performed the graceful exercises, each movement highlighting the elegant curves barely concealed by her traditional garments. Jack leaned against the doorframe, content to watch until she noticed him. "You sleep late for a warrior?" she said without turning around. "Warrior?" Jack chuckled. "I'm a smuggler, sweetheart. Big difference." Liara completed her routine and faced him, those dark eyes sparkling with mischief. "Not anymore as my husband. You inherit certain responsibilities." Before Jack could ask what the hell that meant, Chief Corvine appeared with a contingent of tribal elders. The massive alien's presence filled the courtyard like a storm cloud, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the morning light. "Human." Corv's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The binding is complete, but acceptance requires proof of worth." Jack straightened, his smuggler's instincts kicking in. "What kind of proof?" "The trials of fire," announced Elder Vex, a wizard alien, whose violet skin bore the scars of countless battles. "3 tests to prove you worthy of our sacred stones and our daughter. And if I refuse?" Corvine's laugh was like grinding stone. "Then you leave Zeus empty-handed and unmarried. The binding can be dissolved, but only through trial or exile." Jack glanced at Lara, who watched him with unreadable eyes. The crystals were worth a fortune. But something else tugged at him, something he wasn't ready to name. "What are these trials?" "Strength, wisdom, and courage. Vex Anon complete them, and the mining rights to the southern crystal caves become yours through marriage law." Jack's eyebrows shot up. "Mining rights? Did you think the crystals were mere trinkets?" Liara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper. "The southern caves hold enough rare stones to make you the wealthiest human in the galaxy." The way she said it, the heat in her eyes made Jack's pulse quicken. "And all I have to do is pass 3 little tests." Little Corv snorted. "Many have tried. Most have failed. Some have died." "Cheerful," Jack muttered, but his grin was pure predator. "When do we start?" The first trial took place in the arena, a circular pit surrounded by carved stone seats filled with curious tribe members. Jack stood shirtless in the center, his tribal tattoos stark against his tan skin, facing a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhino. The Korvac Liara called from the chief's platform. "Defeat it. With only your hands and cunning." The beast charged, and Jack rolled aside, his smuggler's reflexes serving him well. But this wasn't about running. It was about proving himself worthy of Liara and those mining rights. He needed to think like a warrior, not a smuggler. The Korvac wheeled around for another charge. This time Jack stood his ground until the last second, then grabbed its horn and used its momentum to flip it onto its back. The crowd roared approval as Jack pinned the stunned creature. Impressive, Liara purred as he climbed out of the pit. But strength alone is not enough. The second trial tested wisdom, a complex puzzle involving ancient symbols and mathematical sequences. Jack's experience navigating hyperspace routes and calculating smuggling profits served him better than any formal education. When he solved it in record time, Liara's smile was radiant. 2 down. She whispered, close enough that her breath tickled. His ear 1 to go. The final trial was courage, a journey into the sacred caves to retrieve a ceremonial artifact from the chamber of echoing flames. Alone in the darkness, Jack followed winding passages lit only by phosphorescent crystals. The chamber, itself, was a cathedral of stone dominated by a pillar of fire that danced without fuel. The artifact, a crystalline pendant, hung suspended above the flames. Retrieving it required walking through the fire itself. Jack hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the blaze. The flames were cold, not hot, a test of faith rather than endurance. He emerged with the pendant and a new understanding of Xylo's mysteries. The tribe celebration that night was unlike anything Jack had ever experienced, music-filled. The air, exotic foods tantalized his senses, and everywhere he looked, aliens raised their cups in his honor. But his attention was entirely focused on Liara. She moved through the crowd like a goddess, accepting congratulations and praise for her new husband's prowess. When their eyes met across the firelight, the connection was electric. "You surprise me, Jack Riley," she said when she finally reached his side. "How so?" "You could have left taken exile rather than risk the trials." Her fingers traced the edge of his tribal tattoos. "Why didn't you?" Jack caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest. "Maybe I wanted to see what I was getting myself into." "And what do you think you've gotten yourself into?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Jack pulled her closer, enough to see the flecks of silver in her dark eyes. "Something worth fighting for?" he said simply. Lyra's breath caught. "The trials are complete, but the night is young. What happens now?" Where smile was pure temptation. "Now we celebrate properly as husband and wife." They slipped away from the celebration, returning to their chamber where the sacred flame still burned this time. There was no awkwardness, no uncertainty. The trials had changed something between them, transformed obligation into desire, duty into want. Lara moved closer, her hands exploring the contours of his chest. "In my culture, the wedding night is sacred, a joining of souls as well as bodies." Jack's hands found the curve of her waist. "I'm a quick learner." What followed was a dance as old as time, itself passion transcending species and culture. Their union was tender yet fierce, a claiming that left them both breathless and transformed in the afterglow. As Lyra curled against his chest, Jack realized he'd found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. "No regret," she whispered against his skin. Jack pressed a kiss to her silvery hair. "None whatsoever." 3 weeks into their marriage, Jack woke to find Lyra retching into a ceremonial basin. Her violet skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality that made the spiral pattern stand out like silver lightning. "Hey, you all right?" Jack was beside her in an instant, his hand gentle on her back. Lara straightened, wiping her mouth with a cloth. "It's nothing, perhaps something I ate," but Jack had seen enough spacers with radiation sickness to recognize the signs of something more serious. "This has been going on for 3 days. Maybe we should see the tribal healer." No, Lara's response was sharp, almost panicked. "It will pass before." Jack could press the issue. Urgent horn blasts echoed across the settlement. The deep, resonant calls sent ice through his veins. He'd heard similar warnings on a dozen worlds, and they never meant anything good. Chief Corbain's voice boomed across the courtyard. "All warriors, to the watchtower." Now Jack grabbed his shirt and followed Lara to the central tower where a crowd had already gathered. Elder Vex stood at the observation platform, his ancient hands gripping a primitive telescope. "Ships," Vex announced grimly. 3 vessels unknown configuration approaching from the outer system. Jack pushed through the crowd and took the telescope. The ships were sleek, predatory things with hull design she didn't recognize, but their formation and approach vector screamed military. "Hostile?" Corvain asked. "Hard to say," Jack replied, handing back the telescope. "But they're not here for a friendly chat. That's a standard attack formation." The assembled warriors murmured uneasily. Most had never seen spacecraft beyond the occasional trader vessel. "What do you recommend, human?" Corvain's question carried weight. Jack realized his opinion actually mattered here. "We need to know their intentions before they reach orbit. Do you have any way to communicate with them?" "The sacred crystals can amplify thought speech across great distances," Lara said, "but only for those trained in their use." Jack's mind raced. His smuggler's instincts screamed at him to run to grab his ship and get the hell off Zeos before whatever was coming arrived. But looking at Lara, at the people who had accepted him as one of their own, he found those instincts wearing with something deeper. "How long do we have?" he asked. 6 hours, perhaps 7. Vex calculated. "Then we prepare for the worst and hope for the best." Jack turned to address the crowd. "I've seen enough wars to know that panic kills faster than enemy fire. We need organized defenses, evacuation, plans for non-combatants, and you speak as if you intend to stay and fight." Corvain interrupted. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jack felt every eye on him. But it was Liara's gaze that mattered most. In her dark eyes he saw hope wearing. With fear, not fear of the approaching ships, but fear that he might abandon them. "I'm not going anywhere," Jack said firmly. "This is my home now. These are my people. The air leaf on Liara's face was worth more than any cargo he'd ever smuggled. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Jack found himself naturally taking charge of defensive preparations, his experience with military tactics proving invaluable. The Trib's warriors were brave but untrained in modern warfare, so he focused on guerrilla tactics, defensive positions during a brief break. Lara pulled him aside to a secluded alcove. "Jack, there's something I must tell you." Her voice trembled with nervous energy. "If it's about this morning, we can talk about it after I'm pregnant." The words hit Jack like a plasma bolt to the chest. "Your what?" "The morning sickness, the fatigue. It's been 3 weeks since our joining." Lara Shands moved protectively to her. "Still flat stomach in my people's biology. Conception happens quickly when the bond is strong." Jack stared at her, his mind reeling. A baby. His baby. Their baby. Holy. He breathed, then caught himself. "I mean, wow, that's... How do you feel about it?" Liara's smile was radiant despite the circumstances, terrified, overjoyed, confused. She stepped closer, her hands finding his chest. How do you feel?" Jack pulled her against him, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms, like, "Just found another reason to make sure those ships don't get anywhere near this planet." Their moment was interrupted by a young warrior bursting into the alcove. "Captain Riley. The ships, they're hailing us in the communication chamber." Eldervex held a pulsing crystal that amplified his telepathic abilities. His face was grim as he opened the channel. The voice that emerged was cold, mechanical, filtered through alien vocal cords. "People of Zyos, I am Commander Thex of the Dominion Fleet. You harbor a human criminal wanted for crimes against the Dominion. Surrender, Jack Riley, and your world will be spared." Jack's blood turned to ice. The Dominion, he'd tangled with them before, stolen a shipment of rare metals from one of their convoys. But that was months ago, on the other side of the galaxy. "How the hell did they track me here?" he muttered. Corvain's eyes blazed with fury. "They demand we surrender our son-in-law, our tribe member." "Chief," Jack said quietly, "maybe we should consider." Never. Corvain's voice was final. "You are one of us now. We do not abandon our own." The crystal pulsed again, as Vex responded. "Commander Thex, Jack Riley is a member of our tribe, bound by sacred law and marriage. We do not surrender our people to outsiders." A long pause, then "You have hour to reconsider. After that, we will take him by force." The connection severed, leaving the chamber in tense silence. "Well," Jack said with forced lightness, "this complicates things." Lara moved to his side, her hand slipping into his. "We face this together. You shouldn't be anywhere near a battle." Jack protested. "Not in your condition." "Our condition," she corrected. "And I'm not helpless, husband. I know these caves better than anyone. If it comes to fighting, you'll need every advantage." Jack looked around the chamber at the determined faces surrounding him. These people were willing to risk everything for him. A smuggler they'd known for less than a month. The weight of that loyalty, that trust settled on his shoulders like armor. "All right," he said, his voice carrying new authority. "If they want to fight, let's give them one they'll remember." As the tribe mobilized for war, Jack couldn't help but think about the irony. He'd come to Zyos for a simple job. Grab some crystals and disappear. Instead, he'd found a wife, a family, and now a cause worth fighting for. And with a baby on the way, the stakes had never been higher. The crystal caves beneath Zyos hummed with ancient power, their walls pulsing with veins of luminescent minerals that cast everything in an ethereal blue glow. Jack crouched beside a massive formation, running his hands over the smooth surface while Lara explained the properties that could turn the tide of battle. "The resonance crystals amplify energy," she said, her voice echoing in the cavern, "but they can also redirect it. My grandmother once told stories of how our ancestors used them to turn lightning back upon storm clouds." Jack's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. "So if the Dominion fires energy weapons at us, we can reflect their own firepower back at them." Lyra's smile was fierce despite her pale complexion. "But it requires precise positioning and perfect timing." "Then we better get started." Jack stood, dusting crystal fragments from his hands. "How many warriors can you spare for cave duty?" "All of them if necessary." Chief Corvain's voice boomed from the cavern entrance. The massive alien ducked under the low ceiling, his ceremonial armor replaced by practical battle gear. The elders have decided if the Dominion wants war, they'll get it on our terms. Jack felt a surge of pride at being included in their strategic planning. What about evacuation protocols for Thenon combatants, Ocean? Corvain replied, the children and elders are being moved to the deep sanctuaries, but Liara refuses to go with them. Jack turned to his wife, who stood with arms crossed and chin raised defiantly. We discussed this in your condition, our condition, she corrected sharply, and I'm not hiding while my husband leads my people into battle. Besides, you need someone who knows these caves intimately. The argument was interrupted by a young scout bursting into the cavern. The Dominion ships have entered orbit. Commander Thex is demanding immediate surrender. Jack's jaw tightened. Time's up, let's see if this crystal trick actually works. The next hour was a frantic ballet of preparation. Warriors took positions throughout the cave system while Jack and Lara worked to align the resonance crystals. The process required delicate calibration. Too little power, and the reflection would be weak. Too much, and the crystals themselves might shatter there. Lara breathed, making a final adjustment to a particularly large formation. The network is complete. Jack activated his communicator, patching into the tribal frequency. All units, this is Riley. The crystal array is online, remember? Let them fire first, then trigger their sonance on my mark. Static crackled before Corv's voice came through. Understood. The Dominion commander is hailing us again. Put him through. Commander. Thex's cold voice filled the cavern. Your hour is up, primitives. Surrender the human or face the consequences. Jack took a deep breath and keyed his communicator to broadcast. This is Jack Riley. You want me? Come and get me. The response was immediate. Brilliant lances of energy erupted from the Dominion ships, striking the planet's surface in coordinated volleys. But instead of devastating the landscape, the beam struck the carefully positioned crystal formations and reflected back into space with doubled intensity. Now Jack shouted the resonance. Network activated. With a harmonic chord that seemed to shake the very foundations of the planet, the reflected energy struck the Dominion ships with devastating effect, overloading their shields and sending one vessel spinning out of control. Impossible. Thex's voice crackled with static and rage. How are these savages? We're not savages. Jack interrupted, his voice carrying across all frequencies. We're family, and family protects its own. The battle raged for another hour, with the Dominion forces growing increasingly frustrated as their superior technology was turned against them. Jack coordinated the defense with growing confidence. His smuggler's cunning combined with genuine tactical brilliance, but it was Liara who provided the decisive moment as the largest Dominion ship moved to a new attack position. She guided Jack to a hidden chamber deep in the caves where a massive crystal formation waited, larger than any they'd seen before, the heart of Zeos. She whispered, reverently, legend says it can channel the planet's own energy. Jack studied the massive structure, his mind racing. If we could overload their main ship's power core, it would require someone to manually trigger the resonance from here. Lara said, the feedback could be lethal. Without hesitation, Jack moved toward the crystal. Then I'll know you. Lara's hand caught his arm. We do this together. They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the massive formation. Their hands meeting on its surface, the crystal responded to their combined touch, beginning to glow with increasing intensity. Jack, Lara said softly, if this doesn't work, it will. He replied firmly, and when it does, we're going to raise our kid in a free world. The crystal reached critical resonance, and Jack felt the planet's very life force flowing through him. The sensation was overwhelming power beyond imagination, love deeper than space, and a connection to something greater than himself. The energy burst forth in a column of pure light that pierced the atmosphere and struck the Dominion flagship. The ship's shields collapsed instantly, its power core overloading in a cascade of explosions that lit up Thesky like a second sun. The remaining Dominion vessels fled without another word in the aftermath as the tribe celebrated their impossible victory. Jack found himself alone with Lara in their chamber. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deeper awareness of what they'd accomplished together. We did it, Lara said, her voice filled with wonder. We actually did it. Jack pulled her close, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her. We make a good team. The best, she agreed, then looked up at them with eyes that held new depths. Jack, what you did Today, choosing to stay and fight instead of running was the easiest decision I ever made, he finished. This is where I belong with you, with our people, with our future. Their kiss waste-ender yet passionate. A celebration of survival and love and the promise of tomorrow when they finally parted. Lara's smile was radiant. Our child will grow up hearing stories of today. She said how their father became a true hero. Jack chuckled. I'm no hero, I'm just a smuggler who got lucky. No, Liara said firmly. You're a man who found his purpose. You're my husband, a tribal warrior, and soon to be a father. The crystals you came seeking were just the beginning. You found something far more valuable. Looking into her eyes, Jack realized she was right. He'd come to Zeus for a simple job, and found a destiny he never could have imagined. The initiation ritual that had seemed like such a formality had given him everything he'd never known he wanted. So he said with a grin, what thou do for an encore? Lara's laugh was like music. We build a life worth living. 2 months after the Dominion's defeat, Jack stood before the Council of Elders in the great ceremonial hall. Liara beside him with her pregnancy now showing in the gentle curve of her belly. The ancient chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from across Zeus debated a question that would shape their world's future. The human has proven his worth in battle. Elder Vex acknowledged, his weathered hands gripping his ceremonial staff. But the matter of succession remains complex. Chief, Curvine rose from his throne-like seat, his massive frame commanding attention. Jack Riley is my son-in-law, bound by sacred law. His child carries the blood of leadership. Half-blood, countered Elder Thera, a stern female with intricate scarification covering her violet skin. No hybrid has ever held tribal authority. The old ways are clear. Jack felt Lara's hand tighten in his. They'd expected this debate, but experiencing it was different. The weight of tradition pressed against them like a physical force. Perhaps, Jack said carefully, we should consider that the old ways didn't account for humans existing. A murmur rippled through the assembled elders. Elder Vex leaned forward with interest. Explain. Your traditions evolved to protect your people and preserve your culture. But times change. Jack's voice grew stronger. The Dominion attack proved that isolation isn't protection anymore. Maybe it's time for new traditions that honor the past while embracing the future. Bold words from an outsider. Elder Thera said coldly, I'm not an outsider anymore. Jack replied firmly, I've bled for this world, fought for these people. My child. We'll be born here, raised here, and we'll call XY's home. If that doesn't make us family, then your sacred laws mean nothing. The hall erupted in heated discussion. Some elders nodded approvingly, while others looked scandalized through it all. Lara remained, poised, her hand resting protectively over their unborn child. Elder Vex struck his staff against the stone floor, calling for silence. The human speaks truth, but tradition cannot be discarded lightly. I propose a test. What kind of test? Corvan asked. Wearily, let the crystals themselves decide if Jack Riley can commune with the heart of Zeus and receive its blessing for his child's inheritance. Then the planet itself has spoken. Jack felt a chill. The heart of Zeus had nearly killed them both during the battle, and if the crystals reject me, then your child, while loved, cannot inherit leadership, Vex said solemnly. Lara stepped forward. I accept on behalf of my husband and child. Lara. Jack started. No, she said firmly. This is our fight, our future. Her eyes blazed with determination. Besides, the crystals already know us. We channeled their power together. The ceremony was set for the following evening, giving Jack time to prepare and worry. As they walked back to their chambers, Liara sensed his tension. You're brooding, she observed. I'm thinking there's a difference. Lara pulled him into an alcove, her body pressing against his with familiar warmth. Stop thinking so much, feel instead. Her lips found his, and Jack felt the familiar fire that had burned between them since their first night together. Even with her changing body, their desire for each other had only intensified. The knowledge that she carried their child added a deeper dimension to their passion. You're trying to distract me, he murmured against her neck. Is it working? Her hands traced the tribal tattoos on his chest, following patterns she'd memorized through countless intimate moments. Definitely Jack's hands found the curve of her waist, marveling at the changes pregnancy had brought. But we should probably get back. Should we? Lyra's smile was pure temptation, or should we celebrate what we have while we have it? Their lovemaking that night was tender yet urgent. A reaffirmation of their bond before facing an uncertain future in the afterglow. As Liara curled against his chest, Jack felt a peace he'd never known as a smuggler. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said softly, "I want you to know this has been the best mistake I ever made." Lear laughed, the sound vibrating against his skin. "Mistake? Is that what you call our marriage?" "The best mistake," Jack repeated, pressing a kiss to her silvery hair. "I came here for crystals and found everything I never knew I wanted." The next evening, the entire tribe gathered in the crystal caves. The heart of Zeus pulsed with inner light, its massive form dominating the sacred chamber. Jack approached it. Slowly, Lara at his side, despite the elders' protests. "This is something we do together," she'd insisted. "The child eye sours, the future is ours." As they placed their hands on the crystal surface, Jack felt the familiar surge of planetary energy, but this time something was different. The power flowed through them gently, almost lovingly, and in that flow Jack sensed something, impossible approval. Images flashed through his mind. XYO's past, its struggle, its hopes for the future. He saw generations of leaders who had protected their people, and he understood that leadership wasn't about blood or tradition. It was about love, sacrifice, and the willingness to put others before yourself. The crystal's glow intensified, and when it finally faded, Jack found himself marked with new spiral patterns that matched Liara's, not violet like hers, but silver like starlight, marking him as something new yet connected to the ancient ways. Elder Vex's voice was filled with wonder. "The planet has spoken, Jack Riley." And his bloodline accepted. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Jack had experienced, but as the night wore on, he found himself thinking about the future, not just his own, but the galaxy's. Word of their victory over the Dominion had spread, and already other worlds were sending envoys seeking alliance. "Regrets?" Liaria asked, finding him on a balcony overlooking the settlement. "None," Jack said honestly. "But I keep thinking about what comes next. We've proven that humans and your people can work together. Maybe that's just the beginning." Lara moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his. "Maybe it is. But whatever comes, we face it together." Jack looked down at her, this amazing woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering together. He agreed, as if responding to their conversation. The baby kicked for the first time, a strong movement that made them both laugh with joy and wonder. "Definitely your child," Liara said with mock exasperation, already causing trouble. Jack grinned, placing his hand over hers on her belly, the best kind of trouble. In the distance, stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had once called to him as a ruthless smuggler. Now they seemed different, not a call to wander, but a promise of possibilities. Whatever the future held, he would face it, not as Jack Riley the smuggler, but as a husband, father, and guardian of something greater than himself. The initiation he'd thought was just a formality had given him everything he'd never dared to dream of, and this was only the beginning. 6 months into Liara's pregnancy, their chambers had become an unlikely embassy. Jack stood at the window watching the latest delegation arrive, a group of blue-kinned Altarians whose ship gleamed like polished metal in the afternoon light. They were the 5th species to visit Zeus in as many weeks, all seeking to understand the miracle of human-alien cooperation there. Early Liara observed, moving to stand beside him. Her pregnancy had progressed beautifully, and the gentle swell of her belly a constant reminder of their growing family. The silver spiral patterns Jack had received from the heart of Zeus seemed to pulse in harmony with her violet ones whenever they touched, eager to learn. "I suppose," Jack wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on their son, "though I'm not sure what we can teach them that they haven't already heard." "You underestimate yourself," Liara said, leaning back against his chest. "What we've built here isn't just a marriage, it's proof that different species can become one people." A soft knock interrupted them. Elder Vex entered, his ancient face creased with what Jack had learned to recognize as excitement. "The Alaran delegation requests an immediate audience," Vex announced. "They bring news from the Galactic Council." Jack and Lear exchanged glances. The Galactic Council rarely concerned itself with individual worlds, especially ones as remote as iOS. In the Great Hall, the Altarian ambassador, a tall, elegant being with skin like polished sapphire, bowed formally. "I am Ambassador Keith Na-Ebring. Greetings from the Galactic Council and a proposal." "We're honored," Chief Corvain replied from his throne. "What brings the Council's attention to our humble world? Your victory over the Dominion has not gone unnoticed," Ketna said, his large black eyes focusing on Jack. "More importantly, the methods you used, cooperation between species, the blending of traditions, represent something the galaxy desperately needs." Jack felt a familiar weariness. What kind of something? "The Council wishes to establish a cultural exchange institute here on XYOs." The ambassador explained, "A place where different species can learn to work together as you and your wife have done. You would serve as the first directors." The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Jack looked at Liara, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This was bigger than they'd imagined, but also more complicated. "What would this involve?" Lyra asked carefully. "Representatives from dozens of worlds would come here to study your methods. In return, Xylo would become a protected world under Council authority with access to advanced technology and trade networks." Elder Vex leaned forward, and the price's expression remained neutral. "No price, only responsibility. The galaxy watches to see if what you've accomplished can be replicated." After the delegation departed, Jack found himself in the crystal caves with Lara, seeking the peace that only came in the planet's heart. The familiar hum of energy surrounded them as they sat beside the great formations. "It's what you've been preparing for without knowing it," Lara said softly. "Teaching others what we've learned." "I'm not a teacher," Jack protested. "I'm a smuggler who got lucky." Lara's laugh echoed in the cavern. "You're a man who learned to love something bigger than himself. That's exactly what the Yao galaxy needs to learn." She shifted closer, her hand finding his, even now months into their marriage. Her touch sent electricity through him. The pregnancy had only intensified their connection, adding new depths to their physical and emotional bond. Besides, she continued with a mischievous smile, "Imagine the look on your old smuggling contacts' faces when they hear you're running a Galactic Peace Institute." Jack chuckled. Despite himself, they'd probably think I'd lost my mind. "Have you?" Liara's question was serious despite her playful tone. Jack considered it. The man who'd arrived on Xylos seeking easy money was gone, replaced by someone he barely recognized. Someone better completely, and I wouldn't change a thing. Their kiss was soft, familiar, yet still capable of igniting the fire that had burned between them since their first night together. When they parted, Liara's eyes sparkled with an idea. "There's something we need to do before we give the Council our answer," she said. "What's that?" "Create our own tradition, something that belongs to both our peoples, something our son can inherit." The naming ceremony they designed was unlike anything either culture had seen before, held in the crystal caves, with representatives from a dozen worlds. Watching it blended human and Xyloian customs into something entirely new. Jack stood shirtless before the sacred flames, his tribal tattoos and silver spiral markings gleaming in the firelight. Liara wore traditional robes modified to accommodate her pregnancy, her beauty radiant in the ceremonial setting. "We name our son not for what he is," Jack announced, his voice carrying through the cavern, "but for what he represents. Hope for a future where differences become strengths." "Kelnar," Lara added, the name flowing like music, bridgewalker in the old tongue, one who connects distant shores. Elder Vex stepped forward with a new ceremonial staff carved from both Zelosian crystal and earth oak that Jack had requested from a human trader. "Let this boy be the first of a new tradition, citizens, not of one world, but of the stars themselves." As the ceremony concluded, Jack felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders, but looking at Lara, feeling their son move within her, he realized it wasn't a burden. It was a gift. That night, in the privacy of their chambers, they celebrated in the most intimate way possible. Their lovemaking was tender, yet passionate, a reaffirmation of everything they'd built together afterward. As Liara traced the silver patterns on his skin, Jack marveled at how completely his life had changed. "So," Liara said sleepily, "do we accept the Council's offer?" Jack pulled her closer, his hand resting on their son. "We accept, but on our terms." This institute isn't about teaching people to be like us. It's about teaching them to find their own way to unity. Spoken like a true diplomat, Lara murmured against his chest. Spoken like a man who's finally found his purpose, Jack corrected outside their window. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had once called him to wander. Now they seemed to promise something different. Not escape but connection, not solitude but community. The smuggler who'd thought he was just going through the motions of an alien ritual had discovered something infinitely more valuable than any cargo he'd ever carried. He'd found home love and a future worth building, and this was just the beginning. 3 years later, Jack stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Cultural Exchange Institute, watching ships from 17 different worlds dock at the expanded spaceport below the facility, sprawled across the valley like a living organism, its architecture blending Xyloian crystal formations with human engineering and alien technologies from across the galaxy. Daddy Look the voice belonged to Kale Nar, now a precocious 3-year-old whose unique heritage was evident. In his striking appearance, his skin held a warm bronze tone that shifted between human tan and Zosian violet, depending on the light, while his hair was a fascinating blend of Jack's dark brown shot through with silver strands like his mother's. Most remarkable were his eyes, deep brown like his father's, but with flecks of violet that seemed to glow when he was excited. "What is it, little man?" Jack scooped up his son, who pointed eagerly at a massive ship settling onto the landing pad. "Big ship. Pretty colors, that's the Andromedan delegation," Lara said, joining them at the window. Even after 3 years of marriage and motherhood, she still took Jack's breath away. Her pregnancy had left her with a radiant glow that never quite faded, and the confidence of leadership suited her perfectly. "They've traveled farther than anyone to be here." Jack wrapped his free arm around his wife, marveling at how natural it felt to hold his entire world in his arms. "Hard to believe this all started with me trying to steal some crystals." "You didn't steal anything," Liar corrected with a smile. "You found something infinitely more valuable." The past 3 years had transformed not just their lives, but CO's itself. The Cultural Exchange Institute had become the most successful diplomatic venture in galactic history, with over 200 species sending representatives to learn the Zeos method of peaceful cooperation. Jack had discovered he had a natural talent for teaching, though his methods were unconventional. Instead of formal lectures, he preferred hands-on experiences, taking delegates into the crystal caves, having them participate in tribal ceremonies, and most importantly, showing them how love could transcend any barrier. Director Riley, a young Alaran aide, approached respectfully. "The afternoon session is ready to begin." Jack handed Kelnar to Lara with a lingering kiss. "Duty calls. What's on the agenda today?" "Conflict resolution through shared vulnerability." Lara replied, "The Terran Century trade dispute." Jack grinned. "My favorite kind of problem. The kind that gets solved when people remember they're all just trying to take care of their families." The main auditorium was packed with beings from dozens of worlds, all watching as Jack took the stage he'd long since abandoned. Formal attire for a modified version of his original outfit. Tribal tattoos, visible war paint across his face, but now wearing the ceremonial robes of a Xyloian elder, combined with human diplomatic insignia. "Before we talk about trade routes and resource allocation," Jack began, "I want you all to think about why you're here. Not the official reasons, the real ones. What are you afraid of losing? What are you hoping to protect?" The session that followed was intense, emotional, and ultimately successful. By the end, the Terran and Centauric representatives were sharing drinks and planning joint ventures. Jack had learned that most conflicts stem from fear and misunderstanding, emotions that could be overcome with patience and genuine connection. That evening, the Institute hosted its traditional weekly celebration in the Crystal Caves. Representatives from various worlds mingled freely, their differences becoming sources of fascination rather than division. Jack watched a group of young diplomats from 6 different species collaborating on a musical performance, their various forms of communication blending into something beautiful and new. "Proud of what you've built?" Elder Vex approached, his ancient face creased with satisfaction. "We've built," Jack corrected. "This was never just my vision. Perhaps, but it took a human's perspective to see the possibilities." Vex's eyes twinkled with humor. "Though I suspect your wife would argue she provided the wisdom to make it work." Jack laughed she'd be right later that night after the celebrations. Had wound down and Kelnar was asleep. Jack and Liara found themselves alone in their private chambers. The room had expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family and responsibilities, but the sacred flame still burned in their alcove. A reminder of where it all began. The Andromedans want to establish a sister institute in their galaxy, Lara said, settling into Jack's arms on their bed. They're offering us the chance to oversee it. Jack considered the implications that would mean. Traveling farther than any human has ever gone. Are you interested? Jack looked down at his wife. This incredible woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering. Only if you are, we're a team. Remember? Lara's smile was radiant. I remember that we need to consider Kelnar's education, and there's the possibility of expanding our family. Expanding. Jack's eyebrows shot up. Are you saying? I'm saying it's a possibility? We should discuss Larash, and trace the silver spiral patterns on his chest, her touch igniting the familiar fire between them. After all, Kelnar could use a sibling. Their lovemaking that night was tender and passionate, a celebration of everything they'd built together, and everything yet to come in the afterglow. As Lara curled against his chest, Jack reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I just taken the crystals and left? He asked softly. Never, Lara replied firmly. Because that's not who you are. You might have been a smuggler when you arrived, but you were always meant to be something more. Jack pressed a kiss to her silvery hair. I love you, Mrs. Riley, and I love you, Mr. Bridgewalker. The next morning brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new delegations seeking to learn from their example. But as Jack stood once again before the sacred flames where his journey had begun, this time with his son in his arms and his wife beside him, he understood the true meaning of treasure. He'd come to Silo seeking crystals worth a fortune, and found something infinitely more valuable. A family, a purpose, and a love that transcended species and stars. The initiation he'd assumed was just a formality had given him everything he'd never known he wanted. Daddy, Kelnar said, pointing at the dancing flames. Pretty fire. Yes, son, Jack replied, his voice thick with emotion. Very pretty fire. That's where Mommy and Daddy first met. Where I came from. Jack exchanged a look with Lara, both of them smiling at their son's innocent wisdom in a way. Yes, that's where our family began, as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for another day of learning and cooperation. Jack realized that his greatest smuggling success hadn't been any cargo he'd ever carried. It had been stealing his way into an alien heart and discovering that home wasn't a place. It was the people who chose to love you. No matter how different you might be. The stars still called to him, but now they promised not escape but connection, not solitude but community. And with his family beside him, Jack was ready to answer that call, knowing that wherever their journey led, they would face it together. The initiation was complete. The real adventure was just